Welcome to the Journey Home podcast. I'm here today with Malcolm MacItyre from Braemar Mountain Rescue. And Malcolm, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your position in the Braemar Mountain Rescue team.
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Malcolm MacIntyre. I've been involved in Braemar Mountain Rescue team for about 28 years now. And currently I'm what's known as the ops manager, but it's a bit of a jack of all trades job, and I've done lots of different bits and pieces. I've been involved in effectively the committee that's running of the team for the last probably 15 years at least, doing various sort of roles.
Mm-hmm. How did you find mountain rescue? How did you get into that? Were you a keen mountaineer before, or do you live in the area? You kind of grew up around there and you ended up in mountain rescue?
Yeah, well, I suppose it was probably going back to days at Aberdeen University when I was there's a climbing club. I got into climbing then, did a lot of climbing back then, and it was, one of the things that, mountain rescue's always been about and mountaineering's about is mountaineers looking after their own. And even back then, I just had this idea in the back of my head that if I ever lived in an area where there was a mountain rescue team, I would want to try and be involved. And then when I ended up moving up D-side, I've lived in Braemar for the last, almost 30 years now. I sort of tried to join the mountain rescue team as soon as I possibly could, and knew that I was settled in the area.
What was it? Was there something that gave you the bug for the mountains when you first started hiking?
It's so long ago now. I can't remember a time when I wasn't really wanting to go hill walking and then getting into climbing. Probably my parents, as a kid, they did a little bit of walking with me, not a huge amount. And then at secondary school, there was a couple of keen teachers who took us hill walking and things like that. And then I just got into it more, and then ended up dragging my dad out more than he might have wanted to do. And ever since then, I've just been really into the hills and kind of all forms of mountaineering.
Was that in this area of Scotland that you went mountaineering, or another area?
Primarily in this area of Scotland, because I was born in Aberdeen. I now work in Braemar. But I have climbed all over Scotland. I've climbed in the Alps, a little bit in the Karakoram and the Himalayas, but really mostly in the Cairngorms, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've joined the Braemar Mountain Rescue team. Can you just describe the mountain rescue team, the Braemar Mountain Rescue team, to me, like the size of the team, the area that you cover, and what sort of activities you do? Yeah,
sure. Braemar Mountain Rescue team currently has about 43 people in it. They are from quite a varied range of walks of life, as you'd expect. We've got, sort of teachers. We've got quite a lot of stockers, people who work in the estates. We've also got people who work in oil. So their availability is quite different. Some of them are 2 on, 2 off. So they can be very, very keen when they're here, and then we don't see them for 2 weeks. And some of them even work kind of other shift patterns as well. In addition to that, we have usually between 8 and 10 police associated with the team. Now, they are in some ways their own separate team, but the team that used to be Grampian Police Mountain Rescue Team, but obviously Grampian Region's now gone. But we very much see them as part of Braemar, and there's lots of reasons why having police in the team is really, really useful. Mountain Rescue is the responsibility of the police in Scotland. Quite often they devolve that to other civilian teams, but we're quite lucky in that we work really closely with them. And generally speaking now, I think most areas work pretty well with their police representatives. It's not always been the case. Some teams fall out with each other and all that sort of stuff, but in Braemar, it's never been like that. And actually both teams go back to around about 1965, 1964 or so. And the two teams have been effectively one team ever since then. So in terms of our operational area, I suppose, we still really cover the area that was formerly Grampian. So it's quite a big area because we can get involved in what you would call a police job, like a police search or something like that. Not so much nowadays because the normal police, if you know what I mean, do a lot of those, but we still might be used to help search remote areas anywhere in Grampian, to be honest. But mostly it's the Southern Cairngorms. So that's the Ben McDooey Plateau, Benan, Benavoord, the Glenshee Hills, and then down D-side to Mount Keene. That would be our main areas.
Now, that is a huge area.
Yeah,
it's really a big area.
Patch. It's a big patch. There are other teams that have got probably equal areas. Some teams are bigger, some teams are smaller, and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for us, for the number of call-outs we get each year and the sort of number of people that are in the team, that seems to work okay for us. We also work really closely with neighbouring teams as well. So there's an Aberdeen Mountain Rescue team. So they quite often will get called at the same time as us. Now, unfortunately for them, quite often they're stood down because, they have to travel further. But it's great to have them. And in some of the bigger searches, it's brilliant to have Aberdeen. We work with Cairngorm because obviously the battalions, the area in the north, and Tayside Mountain Rescue Team to the south. So, we all speak to each other. We all get on really well. And if it's a big multi-day epic, then we'll involve other people as well. Yeah.
How often does that sort of thing happen?
The really big ones, the ones that we're pulling in other agencies and all that sort of stuff, you're probably looking at once every 2 years or something like that.
Okay.
And quite often by that sort of thing, I'm talking about somebody who's maybe decided to come out on holiday. They've told somebody at home that they're going walking in the Cairngorms for a week or a few days. And, if the person at home doesn't know the area and they've not left a route card, Cairngorms is a big place, easy to get lost in. And, searching all those glens and valleys will take a huge number of hours and a lot of people involved.
It must do. And also, often people they'll go out for a walk and then say, actually, I'm going to go in a different direction. I've decided I prefer to do this hill instead.
And actually, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
We all change our minds and all that sort of stuff. But if something goes wrong, who knows when they expected back? What was Plan B? Did you talk to anybody about it? Now, if you're just out for the day and you go out Mount Keene or somewhere like that, and you change your mind and go up the hill beside it, that's not a big deal. But like I say, you're up in the Cairngorms for a whole week and nobody knows even where you started off or where you left your car. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That area of the Cairngorms is really huge when you're thinking that your car could be left anywhere for you could be talking 2 hours driving from one spot to the next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's either easier in some ways to walk through the Larry Grew than it is to drive around. So the distances are pretty big actually. Yeah.
The Larry Grew, for people listening, describe that terrain.
Yeah, so the Larry Grew is a massive valley that splits the Cairngorms really right through the middle. It's a glacial trough. It's carved out by glaciers. It's a massive U-shape. You can see what's happening there, and it's a very traditional old route between Aviemore and Braemar. It's about 20 odd miles walking through. Initially, if you walk, say, from the Braemar side, it's kind of big open wide valleys, moorland, decent pass and all that sort of stuff. But once it gets into the main part of the mountains, it gets quite steep, quite bouldy in the middle section. And because you're now quite remote from either end, if bad weather comes down or something befalls you've got a problem there because you won't get mobile phone signal. And suddenly it's a different sort of situation then if you do have an accident in the middle of that. Having said that, it's a great thing to do. It's a great way to go through the mountains and see the scenery and all that sort of stuff without necessarily going over the tops.
I love it. Although it's probably not a good thing, but I love it when I don't have a phone signal because it's just, it detaches you from the real world when you're out in the hills sometimes and you don't have a phone signal. But for you guys, you must rue that. It must be difficult when someone doesn't have a phone signal. Yeah,
there's a few things in there, isn't there? Because there was a time when none of us carried phones in the hills. And when they started appearing, people were pulling their hair out, talking about how this was going to change things and how it was terrible. And, mountain rescue teams were going to get annoyed by people phoning in when there wasn't really anything wrong and all that sort of stuff. Mobile phones have made the hills a lot safer, don't get me wrong. I really think they do, because what used to take hours before somebody walked out, found the phone box, found a 10p, whatever it was, phone mountain rescue, we mustered, we got up there, hours and hours go by. It's now possible to phone somebody, phone 999, speak to somebody straight away, explain what's going on. That person will be probably involved in mountain rescue. They could be a police coordinator for our team or something like that. And they can talk through the situation really quickly. And the team can be on its way almost while they're having that conversation, which is brilliant. It's really, really good.
Well, you can definitely see the benefit of that.
Yeah.
We'll come to it, but I'm sure that mobile phones cause a problem at times as well.
Yeah.
So what sort of training and prep and skills and knowledge do you need for mountain rescue?
Yeah, so we get asked quite frequently by people who would like to be involved in mountain rescue. And what we're looking for is a general all-round mountaineer, if you like. Now, if you do Munros, particularly Munros in winter, as a hill walker, as far as I'm concerned, you're a mountaineer. So it's not that you have to be a climber as such, because actually in terms of technical climbing, that's not something we really do a lot of in mountain rescue. We tend to get lowered down from the top if someone's stuck on a cliff. Attach them to our equipment and ropes and then carry on down, or pull them back up with pulley systems. We're not actually free climbing the way that somebody might be in the mountains. So although the skills are really useful and important, that general hill sense, ability to look after yourself, particularly in winter, and have something left for a casualty is really, really important. So it's those general survival skills, good navigation is really, really important, and a reasonable level of fitness. We will then teach you all the mountain rescue stuff. We're not expecting somebody to know how to tie on a stretcher or what kind of stretcher to use or all that sort of stuff. That's the gubbins that we will do. So we would train one Sunday a month and one Thursday night a month, pretty much. And then some of the other more specialised groups do a little bit of extra stuff as well. So that's roundabout. And in terms of somebody joining a team, that's the commitment we want to see from them as well. You know, can you make all those training nights, particularly in your first year or so of being a trainee? And that's obviously outside the mountain rescue call-outs in terms of commitment as well.
You mentioned there's some smaller sort of specialised teams. What sort of specialisations would they have?
Probably the most important one is more advanced first aid. So, you know, when I first joined the team, there was the team, not all of whom had, you know, the sort of standard 2-day HSE equivalent first aid. Most of them would have had, and we had a team doctor. We've now got a situation, we've got about 12 what we call cascaders who have done more advanced first aid, and in particular are able really to administer more pain relief, so we can give opiates in the hill, which is really important. And they train quite a lot. You know, the course has to refresh every 3 years, and we do additional training through the year, working with you know, GPs and doctors, and it's given us a lot more confidence as a team in dealing with people. And I think it's improving the outcomes for people on the hill as well, because although we've got 2 doctors associated with the team, you know, there's no guarantee that any of us can make every single call out, and they might not be there, but we'll hopefully have a cascader. So cascader is really important. There's people who are maybe more involved in a little bit of the technical rigging side of things. And then we also have a few people who are interested in water rescue. So, you know, it's not, although people like the fire service are really responsible for that in Scotland, there will be times because of weather and the remoteness and all the rest of it, they may not be able to get there as quickly as we can. So it's not impossible that we would be used for that.
Well, there must be quite a number of lochs in the area.
Yeah. Fast flowing rivers and lochs and things like the gorges, like, you know, Linnadee, the Coich, places like that. You know, these are places that people can have accidents in.
And ice maybe as well, people walking on
yeah,
ice.
I mean, to be honest, it doesn't happen so much as you might think. And in terms of call-outs, we've had a few dog call-outs to on ice.
Oh, okay.
Or people then trying to get to a dog who is, and that's, you know, that doesn't always go so well for them. Not in our own team's experience, but I know it's happened elsewhere.
It's tragic. You hear stories of people trying to save their dog.
I know.
And they lose their life
happens
themselves.
Happens to the sea quite a lot as well.
Sea,
you just don't want to do that.
No. And like, what about fitness levels?
Yeah, I mean, fitness is important. We need people to be able to, you know, operate a decent level in the hills. So a good, keen hill walker is what you need. Decent pace, I suppose, the ability to keep going. And also you do get used to this kind of ridiculous rescue pace where you're tanking up a hill with a big heavy rucksack and then usually standing about for 3 hours at the top of a crag while you're doing all the rope work. And that sort of like, you know, it's quite a hard thing to get your head around because, you know, you get cold very quickly when you're no longer active. So we also appreciate that because everyone's a volunteer, there will be periods of time when people are more or less fit and all that sort of stuff. And we accept that and try and work with people on that one.
Yeah, I mean, you must have, I mean, there's the climbing up the hill, but there's also taking someone down the hill, which must be very difficult after you've just marched up the hill as well. Yeah,
and you'd be surprised how many people it takes to carry a stretcher, because although physically you can only maybe get 4 or 5 people around a stretcher, if you've got somebody who, you know, is quite a big person, they're maybe injured and all that sort of stuff, they've got winter gear and all that sort of thing, carrying a stretcher over, you know, steep or difficult ground, like even just deep heather, is really tiring. So you have to swap around. So we usually reckon on maybe 12 to 16 people as a minimum in that stretcher party who can then take it in turns.
So, I mean, when you're going out on rescues, there's the potential you're going to carry people down the hill on the stretcher. Is there any tech or tools or equipment that make that easier for you?
Yeah, quite often with the stretchers, they'll have a wheel on them. Now, it looks pretty alarming. It's a single wheel. And it's usually a mountain bike wheel that attaches on a frame underneath the stretcher. Now, you can't let go of it because it will fall over. But on a
takes
path,
the weight.
Yeah, it takes the weight. Particularly on a path, that's really, really good. Can't use it on rocky or difficult ground. But once you get a little bit lower down onto a path or Land Rover track, then it's pretty good for that.
Yeah, I could imagine. That's such a simple but really clever idea.
Yeah. And then more recently, titanium is coming in, so we can get titanium stretchers now.
And they're lighter?
Yeah, really light, very strong. So that's made quite a difference.
What about, you know, I mean, if you're not carrying someone off the hill, I saw on your website there's a pretty nifty looking kind of ambulance on tracks.
Yeah. because of what people talk about, the long walk in the Cairngorms. You've quite often got long valley approaches to get into the hills, and a lot of people will cycle those quite rightly. We've always used vehicles quite a lot, so we've got a couple of tracked vehicles which look like a peace basher you would see at a ski centre with a cab on the back, and we use those as effectively as a winter bothy sometimes, so we can keep searching, at night and in difficult conditions and snow up on the plateau. And the rescuers have somewhere to go back to effectively, and we know that we've got a warm thing for casualties to get put into if we can do that. Now, it's a bit like trains. There's certain types of snow that don't work so well on and all that sort of thing, but they have been a genuine lifesaver on a few occasions. And not all teams use them, but on steeper West Coast type ground, you wouldn't probably find it that useful, but we find it useful in the Cairngorms.
When I saw it on the website, I thought, if I was lost in the hills and you recovered me and I had to go back down the hill, I wouldn't mind just having a rest in there first. That must be great for a casualty to get in and out of the elements.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got as you would expect, they've got a diesel heater in the back and all that sort of stuff. They're not without their own risk. You've got a large vehicle there. You could have 10 people in it, up to 10 people probably. So the person driving it and navigating has got to be pretty switched on because, at night in winter, when there's blizzards, you want to make sure you know exactly where you are and you're on safe ground.
Talking to the Laragru and some of the crags up there must be plenty of places you could fall off the edge of one of them in a tracked vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, there are only a few places where you can get easy access up onto the plateau because of that. So it requires, experienced drivers, and quite often they will be people who work in the hills, maybe on one of the estates or something like that, because they're working in similar vehicles most days.
Would you basically take them up ranger tracks? Is that the idea, or?
Yeah,
if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So they will go up certain tracks, and we've got known routes, if you like, where we know that we can get these vehicles up onto the tops.
Talking of vehicles for rescue, you must work with other agencies as well. Do you work with RAF or?
Yeah. So
the hospital and?
Yeah, absolutely. So what used to be the RAF search and rescue helicopter is now run by the Coast Guard. So it's the MCA, Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, and Bristow's have got the contract for that currently just now. Now, those helicopters, nearest one's based in Inverness. And, that is definitely the people that a casualty and we want on the hills, because the best world in the world, if we take somebody off Lochnagar on a stretcher, you could be on the stretcher for 2-3 hours minimum by the time you get down to Land Rover. It's 19 minutes in the aircraft to Aberdeen, to ARI. And if you're injured, that's what you want to be in. And that's what we want you to be in as well. So, if possible, if somebody is seriously injured, we would always try and get the helicopter. Now, they can't fly in all conditions. They can fly in some pretty gnarly conditions, and the pilots are excellent. They're usually ex-RAF. You've got a winchman in the back who's a paramedic. So in terms of the care that a casualty is going to get, it's amazing. And the RAF were amazing, but what the MCA are using in terms of modern, decent helicopters, they're great, really, really impressive bits of kit. And it's amazing the conditions that they will fly in and attempt to fly in to get somebody off.
On the Coast Guard there, is there any crossover? Are you ever asked to help the Coast Guard with cliff rescues or anything like that?
Not really. The Coast Guard have got their own terrestrial teams that will do the coast around Aberdeen. Aberdeen Mountain Rescue Team are more likely to go to those than we are. So they tend to sort that out themselves, plus the RNLI. If it's a coastal thing, sometimes access from the sea is easier actually, so they'll use those guys. Other parts of the country, I know out in the Western Isles, you probably find that there's more of a working relationship with the MCA doing coastal stuff.
You mentioned the police as well. You have a number of police in the mountain rescue team. How do you tie in with the police? What is the link there?
Well, basically, if there's an incident in the hills, you phone 999. Don't ever try to look for a different number or something like that. There's no point. Hopefully you know where you are, or roughly where you are. And so if you can say to the police control room, look, I'm in the Cairngorms, Ben McDooey or whatever, they will then put you in touch with a police coordinator who will be part of Braemar Mountain Rescue Team, who will then discuss with the casualty, hopefully, what's going on, or phone them back if they can, or get as much information at the time as the signal's not so good. They then phone, put a text out to the team basically saying, look, this is what the deal is.
I see. How do you manage risks in the hills? Because you mentioned there that you're going up onto the plateau in harsh weather, and you're going out looking for somebody in that weather. I mean, do you draw the line somewhere, or is it you know how severe it can be. How do you mitigate that risk?
Yeah, it's a good question because there's a lot in there. For a start, somebody's probably possibly having the worst day of their lives. Okay, now if they're inexperienced, they probably think it's worse than it actually is. So we go out a lot at night. We train a lot at night. We've been on numerous nighttime call-outs in the winter, and actually you get used to it. And actually, night navigation can be an enjoyable experience in itself. You know, if you plan for it and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's that aspect to it. How bad actually is it? Or if somebody, it's the first time they've ever been out at night, and you know they don't have a head torch, and yeah, that's not good. I would argue we don't take risks in mountain rescue. I think we mitigate it. I think we do a lot of training. We've got a lot of good gear. We're sensible about our decision making and all the rest of it. Probably the one time when it starts to get a bit iffy is in winter if there's a high avalanche risk around. Now, we work really closely with Scottish Avalanche Information Service. They're based at our base in the winter for our area, and they do daily reports on the avalanche conditions. So we'll be talking to them saying, right, well, what is it actually like? Now, in Scotland, most of the time, there will be a certain aspect, a certain slope, maybe west facing or something like that, that's got a high avalanche risk. Now, because it's always windy in Scotland, or usually windy in Scotland, it means the opposite side, like the east side, is probably scrubbed clear. So you know you can go up the east side, get to your point, wherever they are, and take them back down the east side. We're not just wandering up the hills onto slopes, which we think are difficult. In addition to that, we train for avalanches. We carry avalanche receivers from November through to May on our, everyone's got one on the team. You're not allowed out on the hill if you don't have yours. And, if somebody was avalanched, then the rest of the team will be able to find them within a few minutes if their transceiver was switched on.
On avalanches, if I go out in the mountains without any prior knowledge, what can I do to protect myself from being caught in an avalanche?
I think, you want to make sure that you're looking at the weather forecasts. So you are taking heedance of what the weather's like, what it's going to be doing, if it's going to change, look at the avalanche reports, and then you will hopefully be able to go up the better side of the hill. If you're going up there with absolutely no experience or knowledge about it, then you're definitely taking a risk because you're almost oblivious to the risk that might be there.
Where can I find an avalanche report?
Yeah, well, you can, if you just go onto Google and type in Scottish Avalanche Information Service or a variation on that, then they will appear for the areas that they do them in. So there's about 5 areas that they do reports for in Scotland. Obviously, that's only running from like mid-December through to mid-April, I think it normally is. But they're done on a daily basis.
So if let's just say I did check that and I've gone out walking and I unfortunately find myself in an avalanche, what can I do to survive that?
If you're actually in the avalanche, you've got to, I better watch my language here actually, you've really got to fight for your life because that's exactly what you're doing. If you've been avalanched down a hill, that is your last chance. You've got to really push, fight, get to the surface as much as you can. And in the last few seconds, try and put your hand across your face because that will create an air pocket. Yeah, where hopefully you'll be able to breathe for a while until one of your mates who hopefully didn't get avalanched and saw it all happening, saw your last point of entry and is going to start digging for you. There's something called companion rescue in avalanches, which is really, really important. Okay, so you need to have an avalanche transceiver. It doesn't matter if you're a walker or a skier or mountain rescuer. Avalanche transceiver switched on and you're wearing it on your body. You've got a shovel in your rucksack and a probe. So with those things, someone's going to be able to hopefully find you, and you're going to be able to dig out your mates. And you are responsible for digging out your mate, if you like. That's where the whole companion rescue comes in, because after half an hour, the survival chances have greatly diminished in an avalanche. So calling a mountain rescue team is great, but we're not going to be there within half an hour unless we happen to have been training in the area or out on ourselves. But the people with you will be there within that first critical half an hour. So you want to make sure that they know what they're doing and they've got the good shovel, so they can dig you out if necessary. Now that all sounds a bit grim, but being caught in an avalanche is, it's a really bad thing.
I'm amazed that it's even half an hour, because the panic as well must take over very quickly.
Yeah.
When you're caught. I mean, you're solidified in snow. Yeah,
and you're absolutely right, because I think a lot of people maybe imagine avalanche as being this big white fluffy thing that you see sometimes in the Alps on the telly and all that sort of stuff. Scottish avalanches are really wet because we've got a very maritime climate, so there's a lot of water in the actual snowpack. So that is really heavy. It's going to hurt you. It's going to break bones and all the rest of it. And when it comes to a halt, it actually kind of sets a little bit like concrete if there's a high water content. So it's really hard to push your way through that. In fact, if you're trapped in that sort of stuff, you're not going to be able to dig your way out. You're going to need somebody else to dig you out, probably.
What sort of specialist equipment would the mountain rescue team use to find someone in an avalanche?
The best thing we can use is a dog, okay? A well-trained search dog is better than any electronic piece of kit or anything like that. They are amazing. You know, if we can get a dog in there quickly, they're your best chance of being found alive. Now, I'm assuming that you haven't got an avalanche receiver on because most people don't wear them. But if you had an avalanche receiver, we would be looking for that first. But we know that most people don't bother. Therefore, we want to get a dog up there. So if we've got a helicopter coming into the landing site, then the dog is on the first stick, as it were. We need to get a dog up there.
That's amazing. Dogs never cease to amaze me. What kind of dog?
This is out with my expert field, but I think collies are quite popular.
So reliable.
We've got a collie and we've got a Belgian Malamute in the team just now. The Malamute is a big dog, but it's a great dog. In fact, the pair of them are amazing, and it's really good to work with them in training because they are so quick.
What are they? Are they using their sense of smell to find somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a sense of smell, and so they're part of something called Search and Rescue Dog Association Scotland. So they train a lot, more than we do actually, because the dog has to be current and has to be, motivated and excited about the whole thing. So it's a big commitment for them.
I think that's amazing. They're going out in the snow. They're going to find someone in an avalanche, and they're going to get a biscuit for it. Yeah. Probably
and they're delighted when they get a biscuit. It's the best day of their lives. They've got a biscuit.
I've heard that drones are also used for looking for people in avalanches. Are they? Well,
So I think there's definitely a place for drones. I think the problem is the weather in Scotland. It's quite often too windy or too rainy, or the cloud is too low. So we've mucked about them a little bit. We've not got too excited about them yet. I think lowland searches on decent days, I think, cover a big distance. I can see the point of them. I know that the Coast Guard are looking at one, but it's not a little kind of recreational drone. It's a big thing. It looks a bit more military, to be honest. I guess because it'll fly in worse conditions. So, yeah, who knows what's going to happen in the future? I could see stuff being delivered by a drone.
Speaking on that, I did see a report on the news of some mountain rescuers going up a hill with a jetpack on their arms.
Yeah. I think anybody involved in mountain rescue, when you saw that, were thinking, yes,
I want a shot.
But actually, I suspect that the prep time, the getting it ready, the kitting up, getting it fueled, and all that sort of stuff, I don't think it's there yet. It's not a quick process. But yeah, maybe in the future, that's a possibility.
Yeah, I thought that was really incredible to see. But when you say that, the weight of it and getting organised and getting somebody to put it on, and
not setting fire to the hillside in summer. There's a few issues there.
Yeah, setting fire to the hillside, right? So there's a lot of heather, dry heather, bracken, all kinds of terrain. What are the biggest challenges in the terrain?
Whether or not we can use a vehicle certainly is a problem sometimes. Where people are, if we can find them, actually, to be honest, the terrain is something we can always deal with. Even on, obviously, a big cliff, that's fine, we use the ropes. Steep broken ground, we'll use the rope as a safety backup and get people down relatively quickly. But it's actually finding them. If someone doesn't know where they are and they're maybe injured or they've lost consciousness or something like that, you can use an awful lot of people trying to find that person.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you of an experience here. I wasn't in trouble, but I went up the side, and I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly. You can correct me.
No, not sorry.
Because I think it's one of your mountains, Craigleachish.
Is that, so you're talking about the one just south of Glen Shee?
Yeah,
down from
Glassmall.
Yeah.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Quite possibly, because people seem to argue about the pronunciation all the time.
Yeah. So I took a route that I found on OS Maps that somebody had put on, and they said that it was an easy route. And it was just straight up the side of the scree. It was just boulders, boulder field, straight up the side. It took me absolutely ages. I didn't enjoy it. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the worst kind of place you could have a fall, because someone's going to have to clamber over all of this. When you get a report of an accident in that sort of terrain, do you not think this is going to take a while?
Yeah, sometimes. But equally, I suppose we're used to it. We'll move over that sort of ground fairly happily. It's more some of the remote areas in the Cairngorms when you know it's going to take us a while to get in if there's no helicopter assistance or anything like that. So you worry about the person in those conditions because, these things tend to happen later on in the day quite often. And, from now on, light's starting to come in and all that sort of thing. So you know that it's a longer night than it is a day. And so you worry about them, managing to survive those conditions or being comfortable or finding them if they don't have a head torch,
Is there an area on the beat where you get a call to and the team thinks, oh, not there? That's the last place.
I'd be lying to say if there wasn't. And there's one or two areas where we know that we're only going to get certain people because they'll turn out for everything, and other people are, a bit more reluctant maybe to go. But actually, to be honest, most of the team they'll be there. If they're not in the first area, they'll be there a few hours later when they've managed to sort themselves out and get the stuff ready. Yeah.
What could you give me like a good example of a successful rescue that you've been on where the team's been involved and you've maybe, I don't know, it's gone on for a while and you've actually found the people? Memorable.
You'd have obviously mentioned that as a possibility. I mean, it's really hard to come up with examples where, if it's gone on for a while, it's not always the most positive outcomes. But some of the best ones, I think, have been the ones where we've been out there for quite a long time. It's getting dark, and you can see that people are starting to think we're in the wrong place or this isn't going to be good and all that sort of stuff. And we've found somebody. So probably one of the best ones that I can remember was up Garvush Moor, which is a burn just to the east of Ben Macdui. It's a big high bit up on the plateau, and eventually drains down into Loch Ann. So it's very high. It's well over Munro height because Ben Macdui is the second highest mountain in Scotland. That's pretty bleak up there, and it's always in the clouds, pretty much. There are nice days, but they're not often. This was in winter. 2 people missing. They'd been missing for all of that day, and I think the night before as well, until we'd been actually informed about it. So it was getting dark. The helicopter couldn't get up very high because of the low cloud. It was down at Loch Etchkin, which is down a fair bit from where we were. And then we were just walking past this tiny little loch, and there was just a shadow or a shape that didn't look quite normal, as it were. And this was this guy on his hands and knees, crawling about in sort of 8 inches of slush on top of frozen ice on the loch, totally out of it. Now, we got him.
What, hypothermia?
Yeah, hypothermia, just exhausted, no idea what he was doing or where he was. So we got him into group shelter, got a sleeping bag on him and all the rest of it, tried to get him warmed up as best we could. It was getting dark, so there was a real pressure for time. Got him bundled into a stretcher and then tanked down the hill to where the helicopter came up and hovered just at ground level, and we literally were just posting him into the helicopter, and so they could then get away before the cloud got worse, and then got him off to Aberdeen. And he was in hospital for quite a few days, but he made a full recovery.
Oh, great!
Which is brilliant.
And after a couple of days, you
yeah, he was lucky.
Yeah.
I do not think don't know, but he wouldn't have survived that night.
No,
he was so wet.
Oh, definitely
cold.
not.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking on hypothermia, that's something a lot of people don't understand, right?
Yeah, and I think in Scotland, it's always a worry, even in summer. You can get some pretty cold days in August up there. You can get snow on the tops of the Cairngorms in August, and it's very easy to think, I'll be okay. I've got them a shorts and t-shirt. It's a nice day. I'll take a fleece, but not much else or whatever. But if you get injured or tired or lost, you've run out of food and all that sort of stuff. These all contribute towards hypothermia if you do end up in colder conditions. And it's so important to try and plan for that and make sure that it's not going to happen to you.
How can you tell if you're getting hypothermia?
It's such a personal thing. I'm not sure that you, as an individual, will necessarily know yourself. You'll know if your mates have got getting hypothermic. Some of them get lethargic. Some of them get a bit bolshy. Some people start to take items of clothing off or equipment. If the boots are uncomfortable, the sensible thing to them seems to be take the boots off. In winter we've had that happen to people. So being out on your own is a tricky one because some people do, and there's nothing wrong with that in many ways if you're experienced and have got the skills. But I doubt very much if you're really going to tell that you're hypothermic, because hypothermia is not just being a bit cold. It's getting to the point where you've actually gone beyond shivering and your body is now dropping down, and without some pretty major intervention, you're probably not going to get back up again to what you need to be at.
If I'm out with a friend and I notice that they're showing signs of hypothermia,
yeah,
what's my course of action? What should I do?
Well, to start with, get them to stop. Have they eaten anything for the last couple of hours. If you've got a hot flask of Ribena, brilliant. Give them some of that. Get them to eat something. Get them to put a hat on. If they're one of these people that isn't very good at layering and all that sort of stuff, and they've got a wringing wet sort of sweaty top on, get them to take the sweaty top off. So even if they don't have a replacement for it, they've not got that layer of moisture against their skin. Stick a jacket on them, and then get them down. Get them down off the hill if you can, because they might recover. They might only be that might be enough to get them feeling better, and maybe after that they can carry on, or they might realise that actually that's enough for today. We'll go down.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that probably catches a few people out that they're determined to carry on when hypothermia is setting in.
Yeah, and the Cairngorm Plateau, without being melodramatic, it can be a scary place in winter. If the light is fading and you're up there and you're not too sure where you are, then it can seem a long way to anywhere that's a bit safer. Which doesn't. So there's that whole mental side of it as well.
There's a cracking story on the Walk Highlands website. I think it's called Basil Fawlty Goes Walking.
Okay.
Are you familiar with
that?
that?
No, I haven't. No.
I think it was the top story. So many comments, and this guy spent 2 days up there, wandering around trying to find Jocks Road.
Okay.
And I think he started out at Lochnagar, and then he travelled. He didn't know where he was, and he had a headlamp, which ran out of battery. Every single thing that could have gone wrong went wrong for this guy, and I think he was eventually rescued in the middle of the night.
Well, okay.
It's like he laughs about it as he's telling the story about all the mistakes he's made. As you're reading it, you think, oh my goodness, don't do that.
Well,
don't do it.
It's just like everything else, it's like poor driving or whatever. It's amazing what people get away with a lot of the time, isn't it? And it's the same in the hills.
Speaking of safety in the hills, you're a school teacher. In the school that you work, do you offer any kind of extracurricular activities for the kids in the school to help them with learning about the hills, especially in that area?
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate in that, if you step outside the door of the school and you're in a nice part of Deeside, and it's great. We do Duke of Edinburgh's Award, to be honest. It's good. It's well known. There are other trips you can do that are not the Duke of Edinburgh's Award and all that sort of stuff, but it's got a bit of credibility and it's got some value, I think. So that's pretty popular. We, in fact, we probably struggle with it because it's so popular, actually.
Just explain Duke of Edinburgh. What's required for that?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, there's different parts to it. You have to do like a physical activity, some volunteering, and a skill. But the main thing that kids are interested in is the expedition, which the Duke of Edinburgh has got 3 levels: bronze, silver, and gold. So at bronze, it's just a day's walk, a camp, and another day's walk. At silver, it's 2 nights out, and at gold, it's 3 nights out. So the idea with that is that they are reasonably self-sufficient in the hills. They'll have a supervisor who may be closer or further away from them, depending on the competency of the group. But they're out there walking, camping, making some decisions, and learning a little bit about how to exist in the environment in a sensible way without leaving a mess, or leaving no trace. Camping is important, and also enjoying themselves. It's supposed to be enjoyable. Yeah.
So I wanted to speak to you about safety tips for hikers, and we were talking about prep and avalanches and everything. And I've brought in a bag of things that I'm missing, a few things that I would take on a walk.
Okay.
And I just want you to have a look at it and tell me what I could add in there to make walking safer for myself, and maybe even more enjoyable. So
yeah, go for it.
I'll grab the bag. So we've got a walking pole.
Yep.
Walking pole. Got a hat with a little headlamp on it.
Okay.
A banana.
Excellent.
Flask of hot coffee.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a first aid kit.
Cool.
And a map.
Excellent.
And last thing here, an emergency blanket.
Okay,
so that's the bag.
Yeah.
There's one key thing that I always have in my bag that isn't in there that I would have added, which is a compass.
Yeah. Okay, that was the first thing I was going to ask.
I could not find my compass this morning when I was looking for it. But I always have the map and the compass. But I mean, this is probably, something I would probably take if I was doing a hill nearby. A little bit of food, some coffee, and a couple of bits and bobs. What else could I add in there?
I think, you've got more than some people will take, which is good. I would be saying, well, what's going to happen if something happens to you and you have to sit there for, a couple of hours till a rescue team arrives or something like that. So, a spare fleece would be definitely something you want to take. Now, if you're not wearing a sort of waterproof jacket and trousers, depending on the weather, I'd be saying that's pretty much essential as well. The other thing I would think about is a group shelter. So that's basically, it's like a tent without any poles is the best way to describe it. You can get them that will only take 2 people. You can get the ones that we carry in the rescue team, which take 8 people. But even the 8-person one is about the size of maybe 1.5 litres. It's a bit bigger than your flask, but not much. And they don't weigh anything because it's just fabric. It's dead lightweight ripstop nylon. Now, if you sit, and some people use them just as lunch bivvies, so you sit on the ground, you pull this thing over your head and your mate or whatever, you've got it, you sit on the edge of it, so it doesn't blow away. And within, 30 seconds, just your body heat and breathing out will warm it up really, really quickly. Okay. And it's a massive morale booster, never mind anything else.
And it's not rigid.
No. So that's really annoying if it's windy because it flaps around, but there's no poles to worry about or anything like that. And it packs away dead small afterwards as well. And I see a lot of people using just as a rest shelter, never mind for anything else. Now, we always carry group shelters on the hill because, if we find somebody, we need to get them out of the elements really quickly. And we can stick that over them. And like I say, the big 8-person one, we can work inside it. We can treat them if they're medically needing stuff and all that sort of thing. So, and the smaller ones, the 2-person ones, really weigh absolutely nothing. They're definitely worth carrying. I think that's good. I guess the other thing is people would have some sort of mobile device on them. 10, 15 years ago, it might have been a GPS, but nobody buys them anymore because it's all on your phone. You can get things like OS mapping on your phone. Even if you don't want to pay for the mapping, you can get OS Locate, which is a free app, and you can press the button on that and give you a grid reference.
Yeah, I actually use the OS Maps app.
Yeah,
and when you buy the map, the paper map, you get the that whole area free on the app as well.
Ah, right. Oh, that's good.
Which I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I've just got a subscription. I just use it all the time, and a lot of the people in the rescue team will use that. So I think that's really good. So I think, definitely spare clothes. That's really good. A decent head torch with a spare battery. I know you've got some sort of head torch there. I don't know what it's like, but
I think that head torch is probably more so you can be seen rather than see where you're going.
Yeah. And that's great because, especially if the helicopter's in the area, it's got what they call, forward-looking infrared, and it will pick up light from kilometres away. It's amazing, including like a struck match or something like that. But that's not going to help you get off the hill. Whereas even some of the lightest head torches will have enough to be able to let you see and get off the hill. And a lot of them now will last all night on a couple of 80 batteries because of because of the technology that's in them. So I think that's really important. It's good to have a first aid kit, not too big because you'll never use it properly. The chances are. I mean, it's something you're just carrying. Spare food. I mean, a banana's great, but I would have like a few muesli bars or something like that. Just to keep you going.
I'm going to be honest. I do take more than
I'm sure you do
because I like my food.
Yeah,
so I often I'll take some sandwiches and I'll have something sweet because that just makes you feel good when you have something sweet in your.
Yeah, and it's that mix of the instant hit from sugar and something that's going to last a bit longer. So you need some carb. Well, not carbs, but some slower release. Energy food as well. It's like a sandwich, is the best thing. I've got friends who are really into their running, and some of them will go for that whole high-tech gels, but other ones just want actual food. Sandwich,
I think they're hopeless, those gels.
Oh, they're disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like a gimmick, the gels. I'd far rather have food.
Yeah, I think so. It's good you got a walking pole. Okay, now, there's a lot of people, physios will tell you how good it is to use walking poles in the hills, particularly two, because it takes some of the weight off your legs onto your upper arms, and it saves your knees hugely. That aside, if somebody hurts themselves, you can use it as a bit of a splint. There's a lot of good uses for a pole, and it's always worth having that. So I think that's really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate for me, the coffee. If I don't have coffee, I'm devastated. I left a flask in the car once, and it just broke my heart. I got to the top of the hill and I thought, right, I can have a cup of coffee now and enjoy the view. And then I realised I left the coffee and I was just devastated.
Yeah. It's hot Ribena for me because and I always take that in rescues as well because we've had coffee and tea in rescues and people said, actually, I prefer it with milk. And we're just like, sorry, it's not, that's what we have, it's.
Yeah. I mean, that's sweet. There's a lot of sugar in Ribena as well. You must get an instant boost from that. And
yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. So do you think that's an okay mix? But add in the compass, some more food, a better head torch.
Yeah, some warm clothes.
Warm clothes.
Yeah, for when something goes wrong, that's pretty much it. And then whatever electronic device you're using, it'd be great if you've got a spare battery for it. But I know phones nowadays don't even have replaceable batteries. But, you could take a power pack. Something like that would be quite handy.
I normally also have I'll take a litre of water with me, but I don't take more than that because I quite like the water in the hills. You get some fine fresh water up in the hills.
I'm the same. I mean, Scotland's never short of water, really. Even in a dry summer, you're always going to find it somewhere, and I'm quite happy drinking water in the hills. I see people using things like little pumps and stuff like that and filters. I don't think that's an issue yet, unless you go somewhere really popular where it might be a problem. But up in the hills, it's fine.
Just coming straight off the hill.
Yeah, totally.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I was listening to an interview with that guy Nims who climbed the 14 peaks, and I was shocked to learn he takes 1 litre of water with him.
It's just
boiling water.
Unbelievable. I mean, his physiology to be able to do what he did and all the rest of it is incredible. So it does make you realise what you don't necessarily need. I mean, we go out sometimes and we'll be out most of the night. We'll have stopped for a muesli bar, a power bar, and that's it. Whereas that traditional hill walking where you go up and, you get the summit and you sit down and have a nice big lunch and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, you don't necessarily need all that stuff to go out in the hills.
I had, a couple of weeks ago, I had the UK's strongest man winner, Paul Benton, on, and I was asking him about his food for competition. And he said basically when you go into competition, if you've not eaten correctly by that point, it's not going to help you. Like he's eaten enough that he can compete pretty much throughout the day without needing to eat for competition. And I suppose if you're going out on a rescue, you probably are. You've eaten enough. You've got enough glycogen in the muscles to know, right, well, I can last a certain period here anyway. Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's what you had the day before that's important, isn't it? So if you were going to plan to do it, you'd be carb loading with pasta and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just, and we always take, and that's a personal thing as well. I mean, I'll get buying a couple of muesli bars. I don't mind that. It's okay. Other people have got a lunchbox the size of my rucksack pretty much, and that they need that and they have to have it, and that's fine for them, it's okay.
Yeah, but I suppose you're burning a lot more calories when you're trying to keep yourself warm.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to ask you as well about the volunteer aspect of mountain rescue. Is it entirely volunteer?
Yeah, it is. Now, although I said we've got 8 to 10 police involved in the team as well, effectively they're volunteering to do that as well. It's not like, it's not the same as being a firearms officer or some speciality within the police, really. They get a little bit of time to do some training, but beyond that, they're volunteering as well. So to me, it's still very much in the same spirit as civilian, if you want, volunteers. But I'm not aware of anybody involved in the operational side of mountain rescue who is not a volunteer. There's a umbrella organisation called Scottish Mountain Rescue who is made up of basically team leaders and people from all the mountain rescue teams in Scotland. Now, that organisation does a lot of admin and a little bit of fundraising and things like that and support for all the teams. They've got a couple of people who are paid as a treasurer and secretary and stuff like that, but that's not paid mountain rescue, so everybody's a volunteer. Now, that is an issue which occasionally comes to the fore. People, especially if there's a big incident involving a lot of people, a lot of agencies and all that sort of stuff, some people will say, well, isn't it ridiculous? Why is there no insurance? People should be paid. It should be a paid thing. It's not, and I think most people involved in mountain rescue value the fact that as a volunteer, you can choose to go out, but you always do.
I think that the idea of having insurance is a little bit worrying.
Yeah, so do I.
Because you hear of people in the United States, they get hit by a car and they say, please don't call an ambulance because I can't afford one.
Yeah.
I don't have insurance. And there's going to be people out in the hills who need rescue without insurance.
Yeah.
If we went down that route of having to have insurance, because I think it's like that in Europe, right?
Yeah,
you have to
absolutely.
have insurance to go in the hills. And you're going to get people who don't have insurance and not getting rescued. And where would the team stand? You've called in. Could you just give us your insurance details? Oh, I don't have any. Well, we can't help you.
Exactly.
I mean, how does that?
So the ethos of mountaineers looking after their own is completely lost by if you go down that road. And I think as long as it's sustainable and carries on being sustainable, then to me it's a much better system just now. We don't ask questions like that. We just go out and rescue people, and if there's a story to be told afterwards or some advice that needs given, then that might happen. But it's, we don't question at the time.
So where does the money come from then? Is it entirely fundraising or?
It used to be. I couldn't say exactly when it happened, but probably within the last 10 years or so, the Scottish Government started giving a grant via that body I talked about, Scottish Mountain Rescue, to all teams in Scotland. Now that works out for us around about £14,000 a year or something like that, okay? And that's great, but we've got running costs of around about £85,000 per annum. So it doesn't really touch the sides, to be honest, but I thought it's useful to have. And I think most teams would be in a similar position that it's helpful to have it. So we fundraise, we go to displays, we go to Braemar games and Ballantrae games and stuff like that. To be honest, that's more about raising team profile because, the £16.20 you get in the collection box doesn't go very far to 40 times whatever for Gore-Tex jackets and suits. So the simple answer is it comes from bequests. And I think most charities that involved in mountain rescue, and probably the RNLI as well, would say the same thing. It's people who quite often, to be honest, we can't see what the connection was to mountain rescue, have left us money in their wills. And that's great that people do that.
Yeah. Do you have financial support from businesses as well, or anything like that?
Not particularly, no. A little bit. I'm sure some other teams do, but we tend to be fairly independent of that. We occasionally get sponsorship deals or, money off gear and things like that. And that's something that Scottish Mountain Rescue are very good at helping organise as well. But we don't really get financial assistance from businesses.
The large firms that are involved with like mountaineering gear and what have you, do they offer you like a special rate, or do they? Yeah. They do. Yeah.
So we work pretty closely with some of them, and they'll be good at sort of giving us a discount deal. Occasionally products to test and things like that.
Yeah, Malcolm. So you said also, I just want to go back to this. You'd done a bit of walking in the Himalayas and in the Alps.
Yeah.
What sort of was it just walking or hiking, climbing?
I've climbed a bit in the Alps back in the day. I've not done that for a few years now, actually. But again, that's probably university clubs. We were very lucky in that Aberdeen University, 1 year they gave us like a brand new minibus to climbing club. Just because that was what was available. We went out there for a couple of weeks and did some climbing, mostly rock climbing, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my most memorable routes were back, from doing stuff like that in the Alps. I've done a little bit of winter climbing in the Alps as well. Ice routes around Chamonix, again, a few years ago now. And when I was out in the Karakoram, it was just with two friends, actually. One was a walker and the other guy was a climber. So myself and the other guy, we did a route on a mountain, which is, I can't remember what it was called actually, but it was around about 5,200 metres, 5,800 metres or something like that. We didn't involve guides or, paid people or anything like that. So we just took a flight out there and then basically got a taxi from Gilgit up towards a little village and then walked for 3 or 4 days up to this high glacier where we were unable to go and do this route. And it was great. It was a very memorable experience. We met some great people living up there as well. And then we walked out into, I think it's the Swat Valley, where that then became a real focus for post 9/11 and all the rest of it. And it became a bit of a no-go area,
Why was that?
Because of I guess they saw that as an area where some of the insurgents had maybe been involved with.
They were hiding out there? Or?
Yeah, but at the time, when we were there, it was before all that happened. And I'm sure it's better now, but certainly for a long period of time after that, it seemed that, it wasn't an area you could get into very easily.
Well, you were fortunate to climb it when you did.
Yeah, it was great. And it was really good, it was good.
Is the air thin up there, is that?
Yes. Yeah, I had utter misery of not organising very well and just going for it anyway, which I suspect a lot of people will have done as well. And it's not particularly sensible, but I kind of guess we got away with it,
Whenever I see scenery as well from that area, it is so spectacular. Some of the mountains up there.
Oh, it's incredible. It's so beautiful, yeah. And, what we did was small. There's another 3,000 metres above that for the high peaks of the Himalayas,
Have you ever been tempted by any of them?
Yeah, there's been times when I've kind of fancied it. I think some of the commercial aspects of it have probably put me off a bit, to be honest. You see the queues on Everest and things like that. And to me, that's not what I would want from mountaineering.
Yeah. It almost seems like a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
We'll get you up there.
I think I can't remember his name. There's a Norwegian guy who allegedly cycled from Norway to Everest Base Camp and then climbed Mount Everest on his own and then went back down again and presumably cycled back home again. I thought that was a really cool way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty hardcore, that. It seems like such an attractive thing to do, to climb the highest mountain in the world. But it seems to be that you couldn't really do it now without going up with Sherpas and having people carry all your stuff.
I would question the mountaineering element of it, to be honest. You know, if you're just doing it as a non-climber effectively to get that tick and spend a lot of money in the process, that's not what mountaineering is about for me. Now, if other people want to go and do that, well, knock yourselves out. But to me, there's not a lot of spirit in there, you know.
I feel the same, you know. I mean, I was really involved in the sport of amateur boxing when I was in my 20s, and it's almost as if, you know, there's a guy standing behind you in the ring throwing every third punch. You know, you've got an extra arm throwing a punch in for you, and it would be an empty victory, I think, you know, because there is so much help for you to get you to the top of the mountain.
Yeah. I think a lot of the enjoyment you can get from climbing and mountaineering, you can get in this country or whatever country you happen to live in. I'm not sure that traveling halfway around the world and spending all that money just because it happens to be the highest mountain, to me, I can get as much enjoyment from climbing locally in Ballater or in the Cairngorms.
Mm-hmm. What about, I mean, your own personal reflections on mountaineering and other sports? I mean, how have you felt about a lifetime in the hills?
I suppose my only frustration is not getting out enough. You know, other things get in the way sometimes, work and all the rest of it. But that's a personal decision that many people get around by having a different lifestyle. You know, so that's my fault. It's not anybody else's fault. So that aside, I've really enjoyed it. You know, you always wish you could have done more, I guess. I would definitely not be. I would always be saying to anybody, give it a go. If you think you're interested in it, you know, it is the easiest thing in the world to do is to walk up a hill. You don't need a lot of fancy gear, to be honest, if the weather's decent and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. If you get into it, then yes, you will want, and the training and all that sort of stuff. I just wish more people did it. I think it gives you a perspective on things, and, you know, I like seeing people going out in the hills. I really do, and I think it's great that people are doing it. I think for too long, access has been tricky, and we're fortunate in Scotland that it's a lot better than it is elsewhere in the UK, but it's still not what it could be.
It's something that really surprised me, and maybe it's an unpopular view I have, but during the COVID lockdowns, I went away up to Glen Esk to go walking, and I found the car park taped off. Yeah. And I just couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. You couldn't be further from people.
I know.
It was you were so isolated. I just couldn't understand it. I thought, if there's one thing that you could do for the good of your health right now is get some exercise in the hills. It just blew my mind. I thought, why not?
Absolutely. It was, I mean, you know, lockdown was difficult for everybody. I get that. And, you know, people probably made some poor decisions occasionally, but realistically, people should have been encouraged to get out there and get in the fresh air, get some exercise. But yeah, and even now, people need to get out there more, you know. It's too easy to say, oh, there's other activities going on in the hills these days that, you know, we don't need any more walkers. You know, you go 10 minutes from a honeypot like Linnadee, and, you know, you stop seeing people, you know.
I think the first hill I ever climbed was Loch Brandy up by Glenclover, and I got the bug then. Mm-hmm. I was very, I mean, you probably attest to how uncommon this is, but this was the very first hill I ever climbed, and I had a cloud inversion that day.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah,
and I'd never seen anything like that. So the top of the sort of the hill around the loch, it was just sticking out of the clouds, and you could see across the top of Mount Keane as well. And I was like, wow, incredible. And I really got the bug then. I've been tempted to get up and go really early in the morning to try and get up a hill for a cloud inversion, but I mean, you don't know. I mean, would you know when you would get one?
No. I mean, even living in Braemar for however long, sometimes they're there, sometimes there's not. It's pretty random. I'm sure people who are better at forecasting the weather could tell you that you can predict it, but it's just going out, isn't it? Luck of the draw.
Luck of the draw.
Keep doing it enough times, it'll happen. You know?
Yeah. So, I mean, what's the future for mountain rescue, Malcolm? Where are you trying to get to? Is there anything that you want to achieve in the mountain rescue team?
I don't know. I mean, I think we just keep doing what we're doing. You know, I'd like to think that if we can keep carrying on doing this as a volunteer agency, working with the community, you know, working with other agencies, to me, that is a good thing to do. And, you know, I know that not everyone can be involved in mountain rescue, but I think that volunteering spirit and doing something like that back for other people is a great thing to do in whatever means it is for the individual.
Well, Malcolm, listen, thank you so much for coming in. It's been a real insight into Braemar Mountain Rescue, and I wish you all the best, and the team as well.
you.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
That's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.